They say that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who listens without speaking. But I believe the most dangerous person is the mother who has finally realized she is being treated like a ghost in the house she built with her own 2 hands. I stood in my living room, the space where I had hosted Sunday dinners for 30 years, and watched my daughter-in-law point her finger toward the hallway as if I were a child who had stayed up past her bedtime. My son, the man I had raised to stand tall and speak the truth, could not even meet my eyes while his wife told me the family room was hers now, and that I should go to my bedroom if I wanted to watch television. Before I go any further, let me say something honest. If this opening hit you in any way, subscribe to Voices of Emily so you stay here with me for the rest of this story. I am putting a part of myself into these words, and I want you to walk through it with me. And when you can, leave a comment telling me what this moment reminded you of. Your voice matters here. Then tap the like button so this story reaches someone who might need it more than we know. I looked at Malik, my only son, and I saw a stranger wearing the face of the boy I used to tuck in at night. His shoulders were pulled up toward his ears like he was bracing for a blow that he knew was coming, but he did not move to stop it. He looked away from me, and in that split second of cowardice, I understood everything. His silence was not a lack of words. It was a choice to let this happen. Tasha, his wife, stood there with her arms crossed, her face not filled with anger, but with the cold look of someone who was inconvenienced by a piece of old furniture blocking her path. Is it not a heavy thing to realize you have become a burden in the place where you once provided every bit of light? The memories did not come back all at once, but in flashes like an old film reel that I had tried my best to ignore for months. I had spent 4 years telling myself that I was being helpful, that I was being a good mother by letting them stay. But the truth was that I was being erased. 6 months ago, I had come home from a routine checkup at the doctor to find Tasha standing on a step stool in my kitchen. She was pulling down the spices I had used for decades and tossing them into a cardboard box like they were nothing but dust. She told me she was organizing things properly because my system was outdated, and she claimed that nobody kept canned goods on the top shelf anymore. I had smiled and thanked her, even as my heart sank, and I said nothing when I could not find the ingredients for my favorite soup for an entire week. I wonder if we ever truly notice the moment the foundation starts to crack, or if we just wait until the roof falls in on us. For months ago, I walked into my living room to find the curtains gone. These were the velvet drapes I had hung myself after my husband, James, passed away. They were the color of a deep sunset, and they let in just enough morning light to make me feel like I was not alone in the house. Tasha had replaced them with something gray and modern that made my home feel like the lobby of a cold hotel. She told me she was updating the look, and that I would love it once I got used to it. I never did get used to it, and I realized then that she was not just changing the decor. She was removing the fingerprints of the life I had built. 2 months ago, the kitchen became a battleground where I was not allowed to fire a single shot. I found Tasha stirring a pot of something that smelled like vinegar and sadness while Malik sat at my table, staring at his phone. She told him that my cooking was too heavy, with too much butter and salt, and that it was not good for their health. My son just nodded, never looking up to see the hurt on my face, never saying that his mother's food had sustained him through every struggle he had ever known. He just kept scrolling, while his wife rewrote the menu in the house I paid for. If I had known then what I know now, I would have seen the pattern. But hindsight is a luxury you do not have when you are slowly drowning in your own life. By the time Thanksgiving arrived 3 weeks ago, I was a ghost at my own table. I had reached for the roasting pan to start the turkey, but Tasha touched my shoulder with a hand that was light and patronizing. She told me not to worry about the holiday this year, because modern families expect a different kind of meal now. She told me to relax, and I watched as she hosted my holiday, in my dining room, using my dishes, while I sat there like an invited guest who was overstaying her welcome. Each little suggestion, And each polite update had been a part of a systematic campaign to erase me. She had been replacing me one smile at a time for 4 years. And I had let her do it because I wanted to be the grandmother who kept the peace. But that evening, when she told me to go to my room, so she could have the family area to herself, something inside of me finally snapped. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I did not see my son's wife. I saw a squatter who was trying to steal my dignity. The rage was not hot or loud. It was a cold, sharp clarity that felt like winter air settling into my bones. I did not argue, and I did not beg Malik to defend me. I simply walked past them both, my low heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a steady rhythm that felt like a countdown. I went to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, where I kept the things that truly belonged to me. I pulled out the deed to the house, my bank statements, and my original will. I placed them in my handbag and smoothed the sweaters back into place. When I walked back through the family room, Tasha had already turned the television to a reality show that I found loud and obnoxious. Malik was sitting on the couch, staring at the screen as if it held the answers to why his life had become so hollow. Neither of them looked at me as I walked to the front door. I stepped outside into the cold November air and closed the door with a soft click that sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. I stood on the porch for a moment, the weight of ownership in my hand, and I realized that walking out of that door was the only way to truly come home. I hailed a taxi at the curb and told the driver to take me to a hotel downtown. I was not going to a friend's house or my sister's couch. I was going to a place where I was the only person making the decisions. I paid the fare with cash from my own wallet, money that Malik could not track or question. The hotel lobby smelled of expensive candles and polished wood, and the carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of my footsteps. I walked to the desk and told the clerk I needed a room for 4 weeks on a quiet floor. As I signed my name, Ruby Henderson, I felt a surge of power that I had not felt since my husband was alive. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was a woman with a plan. Once I was in my room, I sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed and looked at the city lights through the window. My hands were steady, which surprised me because I thought they would be shaking with fear. My chest was tight with a mixture of terror and determination, but I knew what I had to do. I scrolled through my phone until I found the number for Grace Hartwell. Grace was an attorney I had known from my days working at the county clerk's office. She was a woman who did not believe in sentiment when the law was clear, and I knew she was the only person who could help me reclaim what was mine. I pressed call, and when she answered, I told her everything about the remote control, the healthy food, and the 4 years of them living in my house without paying a single dime. Grace listened without interrupting, and then she asked me the only question that mattered. "Ruby, do you own the house?" I told her that it was fully paid off, and that my name was the only one on the deed. She told me that this was not a family issue but a legal one. I had squatters in my home, regardless of whether they were related to me or not. She asked if I wanted them out, and I closed my eyes and said the word I should have said the moment they moved in. Yes. Grace told me she would draft a 30-day notice to quit, and that her associate, Marcus Carter, would serve the papers personally the next morning. "Malik is going to hate me," I whispered into the phone. Grace's voice softened just a little as she told me that Malik had for years to stop me from being erased in my own home, and he chose not to do anything. She said his feelings were his problem to solve, not mine. I did not cry, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I hung up. I ordered a turkey sandwich and a pot of coffee from room service, and watched the news at whatever volume I desired. Nobody told me to turn it down. Nobody changed the channel. I slept more soundly that night than I had in years, knowing that the morning would bring an explosion that would change everything. The next morning, I was at Grace's office before the sun had fully cleared the buildings. I sat in a leather chair and watched the city wake up, feeling like a soldier preparing for a battle that was already won. Grace appeared with a thick folder and led me to her office, which was filled with the smell of old paper and expensive ink. She spread the eviction papers across her mahogany desk and told me that everything was ironclad. I signed my name over and over again. Ruby Henderson, Ruby Henderson, Ruby Henderson. Each signature felt like a strike of a hammer, sealing the fate of the people who had forgotten who I was. Grace told me that Marcus was already on his way to the house and would serve the papers within the hour. She warned me not to respond to any phone calls and not to engage with any of the drama. She reminded me that I was not their mother right now. I was their landlord, and landlords do not negotiate with people who have been stealing from them. That is exactly what they had been doing, stealing 4 years of electricity, 4 years of water, and 4 years of my peace. I thanked Grace and went back to the hotel to wait for the storm to break. At 9:34 in the morning, my phone began to dance on the table. It was Malik. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. He sounded frantic, telling me there was a lawyer at the door with papers saying they had to leave. I could hear Tasha screaming in the background that this was illegal, and that I could not do this to them. I took a slow sip of my coffee and told Malik that the man at the door was Marcus Carter, and that he was serving a formal eviction notice. I told him they had 30 days to vacate the house I owned. Where are we supposed to go? Malik pleaded. I asked him where he had planned for me to go when he and his wife decided I belonged in my bedroom like a naughty child. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. He tried to tell me that Tasha did not mean it like that, but I told him to tell her to lower her voice because Marcus was a professional. Malik told me I had lost my mind, but I told him that for the first time in 4 years, I was completely sane. I suggested he start looking for an apartment, and then I hung up. I gave myself 10 minutes to sit with the reality of what I had done. Then I opened my laptop because I was not finished yet. Grace had told me to let them panic, but I wanted to make sure they understood that the life they had been living on my dime was over. I called the internet service provider and suspended the service at my home address effective immediately. I canceled the premium cable package, including the sports channels that Tasha loved to blast while I was trying to rest. I even suspended the landline. When the representative asked if I understood what suspension meant, I told him I knew exactly what it meant. Next, I opened my banking app. Malik had a supplementary card on my account that I had given him years ago for emergencies. I had watched the charges pile up for groceries, gas, and even a new television that I had never asked for. I clicked the button to remove his access and confirmed the change. Then I called the bank to restrict any further changes to my account without my written approval. I told the representative that I wanted to be notified immediately if anyone tried to use my name or address for a loan. I was systematically dismantling the infrastructure of their comfortable, stolen life. Let me pause for just a second. This part of the story is where things start to get heavier, and I want you to stay with me for it. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. It keeps you close while I take you through the rest of this. And if something in this stirred a memory in you, tell me in the comments. After that, press like so this story does not disappear into the feed. I realized that I needed a new uniform for this new version of myself. I had been wearing soft cardigans and loose pants to make myself disappear, but that was over. I walked to a department store that I had always been too frugal to enter, and told the saleswoman I needed a professional blazer and trousers. When I stood in front of the mirror in a navy suit and a tan blazer, I looked like a woman who owned things. I looked like a woman who was in charge of her own future. I bought the outfit and a pair of leather pumps without flinching at the price. I went to a restaurant with white tablecloths and ordered a glass of wine and a crab cake special. Halfway through my meal, my phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. A transaction for $92 at a premium meat market had been declined. I knew it was Tasha trying to buy expensive steaks with the card I had just blocked. I smiled and took a bite of my dinner, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. Malik sent me a text asking me to call the bank because there must be a mistake, but I just deleted it and kept eating. That evening, Malik called again to say he was in the hotel lobby and needed to talk. I told him to give me 5 minutes. I put on my new navy blazer and fixed my hair, making sure I looked every bit like the woman who held his fate in her hands. When I walked out of the elevator, I saw him standing there looking small and defeated. He started to apologize, but it was the kind of apology that only comes when the money runs out. He asked me how I could do this to my own family, and I asked him how he could watch his wife treat his mother like a ghost for 4 years. He tried to blame Tasha, but I told him that he was the one who had allowed it. I told him that 30 days was plenty of time for 2 able-bodied adults to find a place to live. I told him that the internet was gone, the cards were gone, and the free ride was over. He looked at me like he did not recognize me, and I told him that was because he had not been looking at me for a very long time. I turned around and walked back to the elevator, leaving him standing there in the lobby of a hotel he could not afford. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Grace handled all the communication, and I spent my time rediscovering the city. I went to museums, I sat in parks, and I ate at restaurants that Tasha would have called unhealthy. I felt a sense of freedom that I had forgotten existed. I realized that I had been shrinking myself for so long that I had forgotten how much space I was allowed to take up. Is it not strange how we can lose ourselves in the service of people who do not even see us? I was no longer Ruby the babysitter or Ruby the bank account. I was Ruby the woman who lived her own life. As the deadline approached, Malik tried one last time to change my mind. He sent me an email filled with promises to change, saying that Tasha had learned her lesson, and that they would treat me with respect if I just let them stay. I did not even reply. I forwarded the email to Grace and told her to make sure the sheriff was ready if they were not out by noon on the 30th day. I was not being cruel. I was being clear. I had spent 30 years being the nice one, and all it had gotten me was a bedroom in my own house and a daughter-in-law who thought I was a nuisance. On the final day, I drove to the house and sat in my car across the street. I watched as a moving truck pulled into the driveway. Malik and Tasha were carrying boxes, their faces tight with anger and exhaustion. Tasha looked toward my car once, her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She knew she had lost. Malik looked toward me too, but he quickly looked away, the same way he had when his wife told me to go to my room. I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we used to have, but I knew that I could not set myself on fire just to keep him warm. Once the truck pulled away, I walked up to my front door and turned the key. The house was quiet, and for the first time in 4 years, it felt like it belonged to me. I walked into the kitchen and saw that Tasha had left it clean, but empty of any soul. I went to the living room and looked at the gray curtains. I took them down right then and there, letting the bright afternoon sun flood the room. I stood in the middle of the floor and took a deep breath of the air that was no longer thick with tension. I spent the next week putting my house back together. I bought new spices. I found my old roasting pan, and I hung curtains that were the color of hope. I called a painter and had the walls changed from that modern grayback to a warm, inviting cream. I invited my friends over for tea, and we sat in the family room and laughed until our sides ached. Nobody told us to be quiet. Nobody told us we were taking up too much space. I was the queen of my castle again, and the crown fit perfectly. Malik and Tasha moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Malik still calls me once a week, and though our conversations are short and a bit awkward, they are honest. He is learning that respect is not something you give when it is convenient. It is the foundation of every relationship. Tasha does not speak to me, and that is a gift that I accept with gratitude. I have learned that you cannot change people who do not see a problem with their behavior, but you can certainly change the amount of access they have to your life. I realized that the most important thing I had reclaimed was not the house, but my voice. I had spent so long being silent that I had almost forgotten how to speak my truth. I will never again allow myself to be a guest in my own life. I will never again shrink so that others can feel big. I am Ruby Henderson, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Do you know how powerful it feels to finally stand your ground? I sit on my porch now in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The jasmine smells sweeter than it ever has, and the air feels lighter. I think about James and I know he would be proud of me for fighting for the home we built together. I think about all the other women who might be sitting in their bedrooms right now, feeling like they have no choice but to be erased. I want them to know that it is never too late to take back your keys. It is never too late to say no to people who do not value your yes. Your home should be a sanctuary, not a place where you are erased. Never apologize for reclaiming the space you worked a lifetime to build. Before I close this story, let me say this. Telling stories like this takes something out of me. And if you found any meaning in it, subscribe to Voices of Emily, so we stay connected for the next one. Then share a comment with your thoughts or your experience. I read every one because your perspective matters more than you think. And if this